around that wrapping on my foot. So I sat down in a overstuffed living room chair there and took the ice pack off of my foot. That dog went to work on it, and he didn't just lick it; he went to chewing on it. And it took all the willpower I had to sit there and let that dog eat part of my foot off. But he did that. He ate the flesh off of my foot so that all the bones were and all of my toes were visible and clear back to the instep of my foot. And then he didn't let that bone ever get dry. And we still have that chair here to this day. It had some fancy wooden knobs on the armrest of the chair, and when that dog was chewing on my foot, I pulled those fancy knobs. I literally pulled them right off of the chair. We still have that chair. I threw it out a couple times, but Mom always said that was her favorite chair, so we brung it back in again, and she recovered it. We still have the chair. Another incident that happened out there at Brown Valley at about that time was one of the neighbor boys over there. I had kind of wondered about that boy. He had kind of a wild look in his eye, and was suspicious that maybe he didn't have all of his marbles. So I'd watched him a little bit, but evidently not close enough. Because one day, Cheech was over behind the church, which was across the road from our place. And there was a little grove of trees down near old man Page's place, and this kid had took after Cheech, and of course Cheech was very fleet-footed at the time, and she was running away from him, and he couldn't quite catch her, so he threw a rock at her, and it just whistled past her head. Of course, Cheech come home and told us about it. So I was troubled in my mind what to do about that boy. I couldn't see any point in going to the law because they were pretty much then they'd maybe take him and give him a little talking to, but I thought the best thing I could do was put a scare in him. So I took my car, and I saw the boy walking down the street over there one day, so I got out of the car and I got him, and I took him in the car, and I laid him down, and I took his pants down and took my knife out, and I made a little slash in his sack. Of course, he's screaming and hollering, but I'm holding him down there, and I told him, this ever happens to Cheech or to any other girl that's molested in this town, I'm not going to call the law. I'll just come and get you myself, and I'm going to take them things out, and you're going to wear them on a string around your neck. And then he would be good. He made all kinds of promises. And, well, I don't know. I suppose he did, because I never heard of him getting in trouble after that. Let's see, now this is in, it had to be sometime in 47, I suppose. And later on, I taken my kids at it. During that, I guess it was during that summertime, I would playing with the kids out in the yard, and I'd watch the boys run, and Billy, he wasn't going to school yet, but I noticed the way he'd handle his feet and everything, that he should be pretty fast on his feet. So one day I got a bunch of the kids lined up over by the corner, and then we had a big flat rock laying in our yard there. Too big to dig out. If you dug that one out, there's just another one on it anyhow. So I told the kids I'm going to lay a dime on that rock, and then when I say go, you all take off, and whoever can get over there first, pick that dime up and can have the dime. That was quite a fortune to the kids then. So anyhow, the kids took off, and it was like I suspicioned it might be. Although Billy was the youngest one running, he was over there and had that dime in his pocket before anybody else could get there. Of course, Bob, being older, and Roger Santo, the same age bracket as Bob, they kind of thought one or the other of them really should have won that race. So they said, oh, some of the other little kids had gotten their way and everything, wouldn't let them run. So I said, okay, we'll just take the three of you over there. And I put another dime on the rock. Just had Bob and Roger Santo and Billy running. Well, wasn't much argument after that. Billy was over there and had the dime in his pocket before anybody could beat him to it. See, it was in the winter of '46 when Artie was born up at the Wheaton Hospital, and he was a very sick boy. Immediately after he was born, he had Rh blood factor. Of course, we had lost our little baby Donna, our Helen Jeanette, a couple of years before that. So I was very much concerned about this, and I see that frail little body laying there, and he started this bleeding the same way she had. He bleeding through the pores in his fingers and through his stomach, and so the doctor said that wasn't much chance for him unless we could get him up to Fargo, North Dakota, where they had developed a way of treating this something that the Rh blood factor, which they had just recently discovered how they could do anything about that. So this was in December, let's see, I think it was December 30th was Art's birthday, so this had to be right after New Year's. It was the day after he was born, and there was a very bad snowstorm. The road was glare ice, blowing and drifting snow, and well, it's 75 miles up to Fargo through that kind of driving, and no way that I could get an ambulance to go, so the only way I could get that baby up there was if I took him up myself. So I talked it over with the doctor, and of course we both knew from experience with Ellen that there wasn't much hope unless we did do something about it. So I said, well, okay, you get this baby ready to go in the hospital, and I'll go down to the restaurant and get some supper, and I'll take off and go up there with him. So I went down to the restaurant, and there was an older lady was working in the restaurant, and I mentioned it to her that I had to go up to Fargo and I was going to bring a baby up there. How would she like to go for a ride? And she said, well, nobody in his right mind would want to go for a ride to Fargo in weather like that, but her family was all gone and she was all alone, and she really didn't have much else to do. So God bless her, she volunteered to go along with me. So we set a basket with the baby in it in the car, and the car heaters were made a little bit different then than they are now. They was just a regular heater unit sticking out of the firewall in the car. So we put a blanket right over that heater, and then on up over the basket where the baby was, figuring to try to keep him warm. And this Mrs. Sowens was her name. She sat in the back seat then with her hands underneath that blanket so she could feel his face, and we had quite a ride to Fargo. The car would slip sideways sometime, and talking to the Lord all the time, and you'd see cars in the ditch, and I never seen any other automobiles going my way except ours that was still on the road. But we did make it up there to Fargo, and took them up to the Fargo hospital, and the doctor knew we were coming. Probably didn't expect us to make it, but he knew we were trying. So Dr. Prey was his name, which is a very significant name. And we took the baby in there, and it was. I watched first time they took that little bit of humanity and they shaved his head on both sides. They opened up an artery on one side of his head and was drawing the blood out while they were giving him new blood on the other side. And when that new blood had hit that little body, he just turned blue and shake and shiver. And well, I got very sick to my stomach, and I just couldn't watch it any more. And I was just rather certain that I was never going to bring that baby home alive. But, well, I went down to a church there, and this Mrs. Owens went with me, and spent an hour or so in communion with the Lord. I went back up to the hospital and take a look and see, and well, he was looking a little bit better then. It seemed to gain a little strength after he got over the shock of that cold blood. Then I was informed, of course, that they didn't going to have lots of blood because maybe they'd have to do that every day. Well, they did that, and I guess it was about 2 weeks. They gave him and changed his blood, just like changing oil in a car. They took the old stuff out. As soon as his blood count would get down to a certain count, they'd know that they had to give him new blood because the blood had just destroyed itself. It deteriorated. This went on for about 2 weeks, I guess. They were changing his blood every day, and then one day I was up there, and his blood had been changed, and it didn't go quite as low as it was usually going, and then it hung there for several hours. So I stayed up there that day and that night to see how things were going, and after about 4 or 5 hours of his blood staying just above the danger line, then all of a sudden it was up a point or two, and then every check they made, and they were checking him every half hour or hour or so, every time they checked him, it was up a little higher, and it just his body had adjusted, and now wasn't attacking this blood anymore, and from that time on, he made pretty rapid progress. So he went back down to the church, said thank you, and we brought our baby home. Well, I guess it was shortly after we had brought Artie home. It was in the spring, and Roger Santa was over there, and I had built a garage there in the yard, and I had a tar paper roof on that, spacing between the boards, so I didn't want kids playing on the roof because it would certainly poke holes in the tar paper. So my kids understood that quite well. I come home there one day, and Roger Santa was up on top of the garage, and I went back there and said, hey, Roger, get down off that garage. And he said, well, you're not my dad. Well, you're in my yard now. My boys can't play up there, and you can't either. That goes for everybody. And he said, well, I couldn't do much about it. So about that time, I caught a little boy by the legs and jerked him down off of the car roof, or the garage roof, and laid him over my knee. And Paddy was a little behind, and of course he went screaming home, and then he was going to tell his mom, and she was going to go over and really raise hell with me. But I didn't hear much about it. But Roger was a pretty good boy thereafter when he was over to my place. Artie was about 6 months old. The kids would hold him up, and his legs would go real fast, but he couldn't get up by himself, or if you tried to stand him up, he wouldn't stand. But the kids he'd get his feet going, and they'd hold him on his feet a little bit and then let go of him, and he'd run. He'd just clip-clop across the floor until he couldn't stop or couldn't turn or anything, and he'd take a run across the floor, and then somebody'd usually catch him. Well, somebody must have missed him one day, but he took a pretty bad fall and cried a little bit, and so he quit walking then. This was when he was about 6 months old. And one day we were sitting at the breakfast table. I already had a little blanket. It was a cotton flannel blanket with stripes on it. That was his favorite blanket. That was on his bed, and it was supposed to be on his bed. So we were sitting at the breakfast table one morning, and oh, he was making a big fuss, and he was very unhappy about something, and was looking out the window. And so I looked out the window there, trying to figure out what was bothering him, and I noticed that Mrs. Roski, our next door neighbor, was hanging out her wash, and she these striped cotton flannel blankets were quite common, and everybody had a few of them. Only she was hanging one of them on her wash line out there, and he'd seen that. So I said, "Ma, I wonder if that's what's bothering him about that blanket." So one of the kids then went in his room, got his blanket off of his bed, and brought it out there and gave it to him. And then he was smiling and happy, but he thought that was his blanket out there on that line, and he was very put out about that. And now he didn't walk again until the following December, when the kids were putting up the Christmas tree and putting the decorations on it. And Artie was sitting in the middle of the floor watching all this operation, and the excitement just got to be too much for him, I guess. So anyhow, all of a sudden, he just got up in the middle of the floor and walked over to the Christmas tree and started inspecting and looking things over. And he just kept on walking then, like he'd been doing it for months. He just didn't seem to go through any preliminary stages of walking. He just got up and did it. Then that was in December, and now I'd gone to work down to run the repair department in the garage for Lee Agnew. In the meantime, sometime about that time, and so we went on into January, and Mother was expecting Dale any time now, and she had been taking some vitamin E injections, and hoping that we could avoid that RH problem when he was born. And so it was in, I guess it must have been about the 22nd or 23rd of January, and the radio said that we was going to have a blizzard and some bad weather and all that. So I elected to take Mother over to Graceville Hospital ahead of time, because I didn't want to be caught in a blizzard and then not have any way to get to a hospital, because I didn't know what to expect with the baby and all this. So anyhow, I took her over there, and then it was a couple of days later. We did have a bad snowstorm. It was storming pretty bad, but then I had to deliver some new cars down to Ortonville from the Chevrolet garage. So when I took those new cars down to Ortonville, and I was coming back, I come back through Graceville, and here the baby had been born. So the sister was going to show me the baby. I was in the room talking to Mother, and she was going to go to the nursery and get the baby and bring him in there. So she went in there and got a baby, and I looked the baby over in her arms, and she showed me to him. Well, I guess I'd gone to the nursery with her, because Mother didn't see what I'd seen. And this baby she showed me had, he definitely didn't have my brand on him. He had kind of a high, pointed head, and after you have that many kids, you kind of get to know yours. You can pick them out of a crowd. So I come back in and talk to Mom, and then I said, "Oh, Mother, is the baby okay? There's not anything wrong with him." And, "Well, sure," she said, "he's fine. They call him the Little Browns Valley Indian." Well, the kid that I saw his hair wasn't that dark. So the weather was still nip and tuck whether I was going to make it home, so I didn't dare stay too long. So I went on home, and I guess shortly after I'd left, his sister came running in there and asked Mother if I had gone yet. Yeah, Ma said I had left, and she said, "Oh, what are we going to do now? We showed him the wrong baby." Well, I guess I really knew that, but then a little bit of trouble too, because expecting maybe to have some problems. But anyhow, we come home. We had the right one. I I'd taken that following summer. I took all the bigger kids to get them out of Ma's hair, one to give her a little rest and peace of mind that sometimes to take the kids out. So I'd taken all the kids and we'd gone up to the reservation dam, taking fishing. That isn't a real high dam there, but they got there is a dam where Lake Traverse spills into well, it's the beginning of actually it's the beginning of the Red River. They got another name for a short span of river. I can't remember now what it is right at this moment. But we were there fishing, and of course I know that one I'm going to have to watch is if there's anything around to get into, he'd do it, and that was Pete. I suppose well, Pete was about 7, or 5 or 6 or 7, but anyhow, I had Pete. Now you told him, now you sat right alongside of me, and we were fishing in the spillway where the water had gone over the dam, and the fast water out there. You could sometimes get a northern and some walleye and some pretty good fish out of there. But I was sitting there fishing. Bobby was there with me, and he was fishing, and the 2 girls, they were just walking around looking at the scenery, and of course they were old enough that I didn't have to watch them too closely. But Bobby had got his line tangled up, and I was trying to help him untangle his line. And my attention was off of Pete for a few minutes, and Bobby said, "Hey, Daddy, look at Pete." And I looked, and there he was on that riprap side of the spillway, right below the dam. And it's a real steep bank in there, and so I jumped up to run over there to catch him, and before I got there, he tumbled, and he went head over heels down into that rushing, churning water there. While I was, he was between me and the dam, so the current was coming toward me, and I guess it wasn't no time to really think of what I was going to do. I just angled down over that bank and took a dive in there, because that turbulent water is hard to find anybody, and I just dived in there with my arms spread out, and it was just a lucky grab. I had him right between my arms when I dived in there, and so I held on to him. I didn't let him shake loose, and we rolled on them rocks in the bottom and tumbling and going on downstream. And we'd gone down there quite a ways before I finally managed to get my bearings enough to know which way was up, and we'd both been underwater quite a bit of time by that time. But I managed to come up and get both of our heads above water, and of course my lungs are busting. I'm spitting, and Petey's spitting and sputtering, so I came out of the water to where I could stand up then, and draped him over my shoulder, and pushing him on the back, trying to pump the water out of him while I was trying to wade on over the rocks and everything and get back up on the shore. By the time I did manage to struggle up there, he was crying and hollering because he lost his shoes. Well, I wasn't about to go back in there to try to help find his shoes. Pete seemed to have a penchant for falling in the lake and whatnot. Yeah, we'd all gone fishing one day out to Lake Traverse, and we was along the east side of the lake out there, sitting on the rocks, fishing out into the lake, and Pete wasn't satisfied, I guess, to stay on the rock he was fishing on. He was walking around up there on that rock, and finally his feet slipped off and he fell in. But he got awfully wet. And later on, when we were all in the car and we were coming home, and everybody was kind of tired from an exciting day, and nobody was saying much. And he was driving down the road, and then of course Pete, he's sitting next door to Dad, and then he looked up at me and he said, "Dad, remember me?" Splash. That's one of the little things you remember. After Dale was born, Grandma used to call him Little Dove and Little Blackbird. So she'd have the two of them sitting in chairs and feeding both of the boys. Feed one and then the other, and she'd go, "Open your mouth now, Little Dove," and then "Open your mouth, Little Blackbird." And she'd feed them. Art's hair was awfully blonde, and Dale's hair was awfully black. It was all during this time that the morphine that I got addicted to, and when I was overseas, I was still fighting that battle of morphine. I had been talking to the Lord, and I had finally come to realize that something like that was more than I could handle by myself. I'd have to have help. So the doctor there, Dr. Muir, he was addicted to morphine, so we had a cabinet and two locks on it, so neither one of us could get it without the other. But I took to drinking a little whiskey and then working hard. Just try to get tired enough and oozy enough on booze so I could lay down and get some rest and some sleep without all this craving for that morphine. And after coming to the realization that when you have a problem like that, whether it be alcoholism or any other chemical dependency, you cannot whip it by yourself. You've got to have help. It's a bigger thing than you are. So after I had realized that, then I did manage to go a while without a morphine fix. After about 2 months, I guess, before it really began to become a little bit more tolerable. And then after about 6 months or so, I got to looking at all the broken glass when I was breaking old whiskey bottles and putting them in the barrel, and I got to looking at how much whiskey I was drinking, and I thought, well, maybe, Lord, I just traded one problem for another one. So I put a date line with a pencil mark on the side of the bottle, even to the level of the whiskey in there, and I set it up on the shelf, and well, that was still there when I left the garage, so that was no problem. I guess I never had become an alcoholic, but I know what a problem any kind of dependency can be. So there's nothing I can do or anybody else can do for somebody that is that way. It's between oneself and the Lord. That's the only way that problem can be whipped. No one can do it for you. I could see the different personalities in kids as they grew up. The realization, of course, if you begin to realize about yourself at certain times in life, is that you are the only one that God ever made. You're an individual. There's nobody else just like you in this whole world. And then you see your kids, and they're all brothers and sisters, and they all come from the same mold, but yet they're all different. There's the personalities, much more so than the physical appearance, is that the personality difference that makes each one of them as one unique creation of God. There's no two of them alike. Uh, like Cheech was very headstrong, much like her father. Gail, very quiet and trusting, more like her mother. And Bob was easygoing and very independent. Pete, mechanical, always in on any project I was on. He wanted to be right in there. If I was fixing anything and he was around, he wanted to be in on it. But Bob too, now in the garage, he'd come down to the garage and work with me, and in fact, he was probably better help on him than some of the men I'd hired. Of course, I didn't have those men very long, but I had a lot of men there that weren't as much help as he was. Bill, he was always the athlete, very quick and very independent. And Art, he's the happy-go-lucky guy. And there to do anything without thinking of the consequences. Dale, on the other hand, very serious, no nonsense, stubborn and hard-nosed. And yet, in each one of those kids, I could see another part of their father in each one of them. So the miracle of it all never ceases to amaze me. And when I look at now on all my grandchildren and my great-grandchildren, now all these different people are a projection of myself. They're an extension of my future. And yet, when we look, we can find. And Mother, now she was always very dependable, always quiet, never nagging, and her faith had never wavered. She was the rock that had a whole lot to do with forming my character after the time we were married. Maybe she had to raise another child there, who knows? But I know that without her, I would have had a completely different outlook on life, I believe, because it was always her unwavering faith, even during the time that I was going through all this agony of morphine and the whiskey I was drinking and all this. Never a word of complaint, never nagged me about it or never complained about it. So when I look back on it now, I marvel that the Lord had to be awfully good to me to steer me into a place where I could meet up with a woman like that. I'm ever thankful for that. It was many years after the war before I could ever lay down in bed and take a peaceful night's sleep. If a car would blow a horn out in the street outside the house, I'd hit the floor. If there was a sudden flash of light, I would hit the floor. I'd have bad dreams and sometimes do things in the night that concerned me very much. I'd even considered about getting a pair of handcuffs and handcuff myself to the bedstead so I wouldn't harm anybody. And when I was having some of these nightmares, it was a source of trouble for a long time. But now I haven't had that. I guess the last time that happened to me was when Chrissy was a little baby and was living here on this farm where I am now, and I lay down on the bed with Chris. Had thought that all of those problems were behind me, and somebody thought we made a pretty good picture laying there napping together on the bed with little Chris snuggled up alongside of me, and they'd come in and snapped a picture with a flashbulb camera, and I know that shook me up pretty much. flew off the bed and hit the floor and banged my head on the nightstand. Fortunately, I didn't flip Chrissy. Evidently, I didn't have him laying on my arm, which was glad of that. During the winter of 48 to 49, I bought an old 1936 Chevrolet truck and had put a dump on it. We got pictures around here someplace of that old Chevrolet truck sitting out in front of the place. And no matter how cold it was outside, I never had a battery in there that was much good, but I could always stick the crank in there and put my foot on it and turn that thing over a couple times and she'd start. So the dump trucks that were hauling snow got in the habit of calling me every morning, hey, go start your truck and come down and start pulling them. Well, after a few mornings, I got tired of that and said, no way, unless I can haul snow too. And they said, you can't hardly haul snow with that kind of a dump box, which I had a regular grain box on with an upright hoist in the front of it. Well, so okay, then no more pulling trucks unless I haul snow. So they put me on, and I did get some of the money hauling the snow, and then I also sent that truck with boxes of fish clear down to Spirit Lake, Iowa. Little Al Moldenhoff was working for me at that time, and I'd have him driving the truck. And I was still running the garage, and so we'd loaded up a load of fish, and I wanted to change oil and transmission. I had summer grease in there, and it was wintertime now. And I wanted to change into winter grease in the transmission, so we had the truck loaded. I drove it into the Pure Oil station down there, and the guys said, okay, they'd change the grease, and then after Al had his supper, he was going to take off and go down to Spirit Lake, Iowa with that load of fish, which was 200 and some miles from Spirit Lake, probably 250. And I'd gone up home, and we'd had supper, and Al had gone quite a little while. He was down the road when the guy from the Pure Oil station come up there and said, hey, where's your truck? And I said, well, he's on the road going down to Spirit Lake, Iowa, and he held up the grease plugs in the bottom of the transmission, and he said, well, I don't think he's going to go very far. So we're kind of expecting a call from Al any minute all through the night, but didn't hear nothing all night. Didn't hear nothing the next day until, it was late in the afternoon when Al come in there. Of course, he's cold. The heaters in that truck wasn't nothing to write home about. And I said, well, how's the truck running? And he said, well, it seems to be running all right, but it's getting awfully hard to shift it. If that truck had gone down there that 250 miles down there and loaded up a load of fish boxes and came back again with no grease in the transmission, and it was still running. So, we had a good laugh about it. And the guys down at the station, they dug up another transmission. I have changed it. Bobby was coming home from school one day along about this time, and I guess he'd been a play at the schoolhouse, and he was walking home along the edge of the street there, and some kids came along and they hit him with a car, and then they picked him up, and then they threatened him, not to tell me about it, that they was really going to raise hell with him if he did tell me. So Bobby was kind of afraid to tell me, but he was banged up a little bit, and his mother had taken him and finally got it out of him that the car had hit him. So then I asked him about it, and then he was scared. And he said that kid said that if he told them that if he told me that they were going to raise hell with him in school. So, well, I had to go up there and call, and them two kids and their dad, and they didn't have a driver's license. So we kind of got an understanding there that those boys were not to be driving a car or a pickup anymore. So as long as I was in Browns Valley there, I never did see them. Long about this time, after I'd got used to being off of morphine and becoming just a little bit more calm and civilized and uh, constant communion with the Lord, I began to worry about those kids in school, especially the boys. Because of the reputation that I had and all this, I could see where it was going to be a terrific problem for more so for the boys in the school than it would be for the girls, because the boys being the son of who I was, the kids in school would probably expect them to be just as hard nosed and roughneck as their father was, and I wasn't too interested in having the kids have to fight that battle. So I was considering all the time what to do about this. I finally come to the conclusion the only thing I could do was move away where nobody knew me. So I had that in the back of my mind, and that through the fall of '49, and so in the spring of 1950, then I decided at the time I was going to have to do something about this. So in the meantime, I joined the Knights of Columbus, and we had some prayer sessions with them, and I had a pretty good working relation with Father Kunkel over at church. So I decided the best thing for me to do was to just take off to someplace where nobody knew me and just let the kids build their own reputation. So I left and I went down to the city, and they were hiring again at the Arsenal. I was going to open that up again, so I went down there and applied. I got hired right away. So